XM's Artist Confidential.
Artist.
Master. Virtuoso. Proficient at his or her craft.
Confidential.
Restricted for your ears only.
XM's Artist Confidential.
Access to artists you will only find on XM.
Artist Confidential.
Smart radio.
Intelligent interaction.
Timeless artists share their craft uncensored. No rules. And before a live audience in XM's Performance Theater.
This is Artist Confidential. From XM's Department of Original Programming.
My father used to play the balalaika. I guess he used to play at weddings and stuff like that. But my mother hid that fact from me, and she never wanted me to be a musician, so I had to find out from other people.
Rush, celebrating their 30th year in music. Virtuosos of rock and technology.
Alex and I were both heavy fans of The Who and the Yardbirds and Zeppelin, and then a friend of mine at school turned me on to an album called Time and a Word by Yes, and it really changed my life.
And always one of rock's most celebrated bands.
Part of our audition process when Neil first came into the studio is we started playing that riff. He got right into it. We looked at each other and went, oh yeah, okay.
Alex Lifeson and Geddy Lee share their imagination and their magic.
So we got to know him on the road, and Alex and I were going, this guy reads a lot.
Artist Confidential with Rush, an exclusive of XM Satellite Radio.
Now, from XM's Performance Theater, before a live audience, here is Artist Confidential host, George Taylor Morris.
Welcome to another XM Artist Confidential. This time we're going to mine north of the border with a band that's made the full circle in their musical journey, from a garage band to megastar rockers who really defined a generation of progressive music, and it looks like back to a garage band again. This is rock that really is a four-letter word. So please give it up for Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, Rush.
Thank you. How much you paying these people?
Thanks for stopping by. It's all the time we have. Hey, welcome. Thanks for being here at XM.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure. For those on the radio side of this, Geddy Lee, bass vocals, keyboards, synths for Rush, and Alex Lifeson, guitars, many of them. So here we are, 30 years down the road from the beginning of your recording career, about 35 years since you were kicking around in garages and clubs in Canada, around Lake Huron, playing other bands' songs. So on your 30th anniversary, you could have done a new album, you could have put out an amazing box set, but something completely original. But what you really did was just turn the page back and gave us feedback to honor a lot of these bands you grew up with. This is a surprise for a lot of people, but was it a surprise for you when you sat down and figured out this is just kind of what you wanted to do?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was a friend of mine had suggested to me that maybe we want to think about doing that. And at first it was kind of weird. We thought, well, I don't know, do we really want to go to the hassle of learning all these songs that at the time seemed so difficult to learn? But then we started talking about it, and we started sending emails back and forth to Neil, and suddenly everybody got excited about the idea of playing somebody else's music for a change. And we started reminiscing about songs that we loved when we were growing up, and it just turned into a kind of a fun project. At the same time, we knew that if it wasn't working, it was no big deal not to do it, you know, so we had kind of nothing to lose. And Alex would come over to my house in the mornings, and we would just jam on these old songs and laugh a lot. So it turned out.
So did you have to go back and listen to them a few times to catch on? Or were these things because you played these, I guess, when you were...
Well, they're not particularly difficult songs to learn, although, like Geddy said back then, learning them, they were the most difficult songs you could imagine. But listening to the original versions, we realized that there were only 3 or 4 chords in every song. Everybody's out of tune. Tempo is terrible. You know, they were, I don't know what they were thinking, but they were great. And they just, were so exciting. And it brought back so many memories. I mean, these songs we've played certainly in Rush, in the early days of Rush, and in other basement bands that we both played in, and we would jam together on songs like Crossroads.
Yeah, I think with the exception of The Seeker, I think we played every one of those songs in one crappy band or another. You know?
and it started out, we were thinking, maybe we'll just do 2 or 3 and make them available on our website, and then it kind of expanded to 5, and then by the time we got done with the basic tracks recording, we were up to 8. And I think if we'd had more time, we may have done 3 or 4 more, because it really ended up being a lot of fun, and it happened so quickly. We were able, we sat down for 2 or 3 weeks and worked through the arrangements, and we filtered a lot of stuff out, songs that we didn't think would really work. We went to the trouble of recording them, but if Geddy's vocals, for example, didn't fit or feel right to a particular song, then we passed on it. So outside of that, it was only 2.5 weeks for us to record all this stuff. Normally, for a Rush record, 2.5 weeks we're just almost through one song.
Well, yeah. So 2.5 weeks is usually lunch.
So this is the basement band you were in the beginning, except with chops now. I mean, you really... Now, you turned some of these songs... You certainly made them Rush songs. Mm-hmm. You turned them around nicely. There's a Who, The Seeker, or 2 if you want to count Summertime Blues, which is a lot of people put in that Who library. Got a little Foxy Lady thing going at the beginning of that. That was very nice. Yeah. That was. So were you thinking of doing a Hendrix song in this set too? We did, actually. We worked up Manic Depression, and instrumentally it was pretty good, certainly no Jimi Hendrix, but it was... Go on.
Well, he's older.
You look just like him.
But there's an example when Geddy put his vocals down on it, it just didn't seem right to us, and that's almost sacred, and it wasn't...
Yeah, Jimmy's breath on those records is about this wide, I mean, you can't take a skinny white guy from Canada and ask him to sing a Jimmy song. It just seemed wrong. And there were certain artists like that, like Led Zeppelin was another one, that there's so much personality in their playing that we didn't feel we could remove that personality from the song. And that's why we went really far back, too, to a period that some of those songs are starting to show their age. And we thought, well, it'd be fun to refresh them in a way.
Well, it's great to be able to hear the influences, particularly on your bass work. I mean, you certainly must have listened to John Entwistle and Jack Bruce when you were growing up. Crossroads is just a screaming track. Eric Clapton's got nothing on you, Alex.
Yeah, that song was fun to do, too, because we basically just left it as the three, we recorded it live in the studio, like in a room like this, and we really didn't do anything to it. We just moved the bass to one side and the guitar to the other side, and then I threw a vocal track on afterwards, and that was it. So
4 mics on the drums. I mean, it was very straightforward. We ran it down, I think, twice, and that was one of the takes. No click track. All of us in the same room at the same time. We don't really record like that anymore. We're sort of have made it so efficient, and everybody does their own thing. So it was really refreshing to be able to be in the room. Filled it with candles and lava lamps and some old rugs thrown down on the floor.
What kind of incense
couch
were you
in the
using?
corner. A special Canadian kind.
Before we take a question here, and this will actually lead into this, if you want to start off with Heart Full of Soul.
Sure.
You can grab these 2 nice acoustic guitars you got hanging out here. 2 Yardbirds classics on this. One Jeff Beck has always said was his favorite, which was Shapes of Things. But I'm curious why you picked Heart Full of Soul, because that band certainly had its share of just great tunes, too.
Well, you could have done an album of nothing but Yardbird songs, first of all, because there's so many great songs. And we used to play so many of them when we were really young. And Shapes was a song that we always loved, and we used to play that years and years ago. And we never played Heart Full of Soul, in fact. But it was one of those songs we always loved, and we didn't think we could do it justice. And it was, I think, the last song we actually recorded for this thing. we were just listening to it in the control room one day, and we said, wouldn't it be great to do this? So we said, well, let's try it. And we threw down kind of a quick, sketchy version of it, and we just liked it a lot. And a friend of ours loaned Alex an electric sitar for the front electric parts, and it was fun to do. And I love the version that we did of it. I'm really pleased with it.
Geddy Lee, Alex Lifeson, Rush.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Are you ready? I just hope my voice is ready. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sick at heart and lonely, deep in dark despair, thinking one thought only, where is she? Tell me where. And if she says to you she don't love me, just give her my message, tell her of my plea. And I know that if she'd have me back again, that I would never make her sad. I've got a heart full of soul. And I know that if she'd have me back again, that I would never make her sad. I've got a heart full of soul. She's been gone such a long time, longer than I can bear. But if she said she wants me, tell her I'll be there. And if she says to you she don't love me, just give her my message, tell her of my plea. And I know that if she'd have me back again, I would never make her sad. I've got a heart full of soul. Thank you. You're too kind.
Was it you that put that other chord in there?
No, that wasn't me. That was a free bonus chord provided by Alex Lifeson.
Very generous with my chords early in the morning.
We're not used to playing this early in the day, I have to tell you.
Geddy and Alex from Rush on our XM Artist Confidential. So we have a room full of Rush fans here, and they've put some questions together for you. So I'll just go to the first one. We have people from all over the world here, basically. From
I recognize some faces
Argentina,
out there. I've
Nebraska,
seen you before.
California, Washington, and from Knoxville, Tennessee. This is David. Say hi to Rush.
Hi.
Hi,
Dude.
Just want to say, first off, thanks for 3 decades of amazing music.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My question is, if Paul Martin asked you to submit one of Rush's studio albums for a time capsule, which one would you give him and why?
Well, that's a tough question to answer. I think the obvious answer would probably be Tom Sawyer, because it's seems.
Album, no.
Oh, the whole
Yeah,
album.
studio album.
A studio album. Well, I'll give him somebody else's album, I think. Maybe Moving Pictures, I guess, just because it seems to be the quintessential Rush album. How about you, Lurks?
Well, yeah, I'd probably say Moving Pictures, but I think For us personally, Vapor Trails was probably the most passionate, heartfelt record that we did. We'd gone through so much, as you know, with Neil's tragedy, and it was such a rebirth for us. And it was clearly the most fun record that we ever made, the most enjoyable record. I shouldn't say fun, but the most enjoyable, satisfying record we probably ever made. We reached a whole new level of the way we worked together, and taking the kind of time that we took with it. It was really an incredible experience for us.
Yeah, but it wasn't an easy record to make. It took a long time, and it was tough going in the early days. And there was a lot of emotion flying around, so I think that's why, as Alex says, it feels so right to look back on it, because it was a big step for us.
That's very apparent in the album, I think, too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you guys started as a rock band and then just became the progressive rock band, and I'm sure that there was a transition that went into that. When did you discover bands like Yes and Genesis and Pink Floyd, and realize that there was kind of a different page you could turn in the music that you were doing?
Well, for me, Alex and I were both heavy fans of The Who and the Yardbirds and Zeppelin, and in a way, Zeppelin were kind of a progressive rock band, because they started doing things with rock and hard rock that had never been done before, adding other influences. But a friend of mine at school turned me on to an album called Time and a Word by Yes, and it really changed my life. I mean, it was one of those unbelievable moments where you're going, wow, look what you can do in the context of rock. And that led to listening to Genesis and Van der Graaf Generator and all these great English progressive bands. And I think the same was true with Alex.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. We were hanging out together all the time. Of course. Remember me?
You were that
the
guy.
guy sleeping on the floor of your bedroom,
Yeah.
sneaking through the window?
You ate all my blueberry buns.
That's it.
I want some of them back.
You could have just been another hard rock band like April Wine or Mahogany Rush. Were those bands that influenced you while you were kind of getting into it at all?
Not really, no. We loved the British bands mostly. Yeah. We were very much a product of British rock.
Let's go to someone from Austin, Texas here in the audience, Debbie Sanders.
Geddy, you always strike me as being very articulate and eloquent in interviews that I've read and heard. And my question is, I know Neil is the writer, but your family certainly has an important story to tell. And I was wondering if you ever wondered about writing maybe a biography of your family or an autobiography.
Well, thank you, first of all, for saying I'm articulate. Only after 11 in the morning. Well, my mother had quite a life. And, what her and most of my relatives went through in the Holocaust was quite a story. And you can talk to any of them, and the stories they tell you all could be novels. And at one point I started cataloging interviews with her, because just for my own family's sake, there are stories that I want to keep alive in our family that my grandchildren and great-grandchildren should know what they went through. So I think that's a story to tell, but whether it's a story to tell to the public or just to keep in my family, I'm not sure about that. But it is something I would like to put together.
How about you, Alex? No, not to laugh. Your family immigrated and ended up in Canada.
Yeah, my parents met in Canada, but they were both from Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia. They also had gone through a terrible time during the war, and they were in refugee camps after the war. My father in Italy and my mother's family in Austria. And they ended up in Canada, where they entered the country and they were sent out to the western part, to British Columbia, to work in the mines in BC or in the farms out west, and met there and came to Toronto, and that's where I grew up. And I think we all have stories to tell in that sense. But my memory is terrible, and I've forgotten most of it. In fact, what was the question again?
The question was, did anybody in your family play music?
Oh, that.
Did you have musical parents or brothers and sisters who were musical, or are you guys the standard bearers for doing music in your
Well,
family?
I found out after my father had passed away from an aunt, in fact, that my father used to play the balalaika when he was like 12, 13 years old, and I guess he used to play at weddings and stuff like that. But that was hidden. My mother hid that fact from me. She never wanted me to be a musician, so I had to find out from other people.
She's not disappointed now.
No, she's not.
When did you start playing keyboards?
Well, when I was a kid, I took piano lessons like everybody else did, forced to play piano. But I guess it was sometime in the late 70s I started thinking that adding some textures, other ways of adding melody to the band would be fun. I picked up a Mini Moog and started adding single line stuff, and that was a very exciting time for synthesizer development. All these companies were coming up with these new instruments, and I just kind of got hooked on the sounds, and I started taking piano lessons again at that point and got a certain level of proficiency, but I was just way too lazy to practice as much as I should on that, and I don't really consider myself to be a very accomplished keyboard player, but I can make some necessary noises when I have to.
Well, it's become certainly part of the whole fabric of what you guys do. And watching you on stage, I'm always amazed that that all of you can trigger this entire extra band that kind of plays around you. Does that come from the production and the albums itself and then figuring out how to do it live?
In the early days, I think when we went into the studio, we wrote with that in mind. How do we play this stuff live? And we stayed very true to that. We wouldn't put a rhythm guitar in under a solo, for example, because we couldn't do it live. Later on, as we developed our songs more in terms of production, we sort of said, well, we'll figure it out later when we get into rehearsals. We'll try to figure out some way. And then the technology became a great benefit, and you were able to take things that you'd recorded on a record and trigger it with pedals or whatever, and create a much bigger sound of parts that you played in the studio. And that's really, we sort of were at the very leading edge of that whole technology and how we applied it to the band. And it's, although it's very busy, it's quite comfortable and normal to us up there to keep constantly working on other things.
Yeah, when we first started doing it, the technology really was barely invented. Like, this whole MIDI technology, well, we didn't really have that back then, and we were trying to invent it. And we had these incredible, bizarre-looking synthesizers with these huge cables that would go to our foot pedals to try to trigger certain keyboard notes, and then sequencer technology developed so you could actually record keyboard chords on a sequencer and then trigger them. And then, of course, now with sampling being so easy, we can actually lift chords or special effects or even guitar moments and background vocal moments, all kinds of little effecty things, and we can have them programmed to different pedals. So that's what we're doing when we're running around with our feet up there, just supplementing our three-piece sound with all those little bits.
So was there ever a point where first of all, you ever considered having somebody else in the band, keyboards or an extra guitarist, or somebody just knocked on your door insistently wanting to be in your band? I'm curious.
We've spoken about that a number of times. In fact, before the Vapor Trails tour, Geddy said, I could really use a hand with some of the keyboard things. I'd like to be able to move around on stage and have a little more fun. And we just sort of ignored him. And he mentioned it a few times, and we just kept ignoring him. And then the tour began, and it was too late. That's a true story.
But I made them share the responsibility. So they have pedals now. Even Neil triggers stuff on his drum pads.
We have a chemistry in our band, and I think bringing in even a utility musician like that would first of all disrupt that chemistry. And secondly, we've always made things challenging for ourselves, and why would we stop now? So, you put the onus on yourself and create a little bit more work, but in the end, it's always more rewarding.
Yeah, we also felt that our fans would rather see us struggle up there to get it right rather than have another member.
So when Neil came into this band, he really brought a whole different texture to what you do because of his lyrical, because he's a great drummer, but lyrically. So he laid out some just magnificent opuses, 2112, a whole series of things. And I'm curious what the looks exchanged between the two of you were when that kind of came down and you realized that there was a lot more work to do to get off to where this was going.
Well, his entry in the band was a kind of catalytic effect, like we wanted to go in that direction. Alex and I were writing more challenging music than John Rutsey, our original drummer, was comfortable with. He was a basic rock and roller, and we had this opening part to Anthem, for example, from our Fly By Night album. We had that written for ages, and he didn't really want any part of it. And part of our audition process when Neil first came into the studio is we started playing that riff, and it's in a weird time signature, but he got right into it. We looked at each other and went, oh yeah, okay. But when we started touring with him, we really didn't know him. We were pretty well strangers because he was in the band 2 weeks and we were touring America. So we got to know him on the road, and Alex and I would go, this guy reads a lot. And we didn't really want to do lyrics. We said, maybe he can do the lyrics.
If he reads, he can write.
So we said, hey, have you ever written any lyrics? And he said, no. He said, well, maybe you should try. And I think one of the first songs he wrote was Beneath, Between, and Behind, or one of those songs. And we thought, whoa, this guy's now writing too much. I got to sing all this? But it began a whole challenge for him, and he's a person that loves to be challenged. I mean, every minute of his day, he's working at, 120%. He's just that kind of guy, very powerful guy. And I think he loved the idea of being able to express himself lyrically, and as it happens, he turned out to be pretty darn good at it.
So you get a page of lyrics from Neil, and what's your process for interpreting that?
Well, he gives me a few pages of lyrics. Alex and I sit down, we read them, and we just read them and try to get a vibe from them. We discuss them amongst each other and see, how we feel about them, which ones are stronger, which ones resonate with us. And if they don't resonate with us, it's not a question of going back to him and saying, these don't resonate with us. We just let it be, and we start writing. And sometimes a song that didn't resonate with you before, suddenly when you find a chord combination, I'll just pull it over and start singing it, and all of a sudden there's a connection, and it has a whole different meaning. All of a sudden it just feels very different. And some lyrics, right from the beginning, Alex and I will just go, oh, these are great. And we just sit down, and there's something that just happens chemically. It just kind of charges us, and I'll write a melody for it, and then we'll build a song around that. And he's incredible to work with in terms of writing and editing. He gives me free, total range on his lyrics. So if there's only one chorus in that whole song or 3 lines that I love, I'll pull those 3 lines out and I'll write something for it, and I'll go back to him and say, look, I love these 3 lines. I can really make them happen, but I can't do anything with the rest. And he'll go, okay. And he'll go back and he'll start thinking about it in a different way, and he'll write more stuff. And, he's just incredibly balanced, and there's no ego involved in working with him at all. He's not possessive about anything he's written. Unlike Alex and I, who get really pissed off. What do you mean you don't like that? But no, he's just a treat to work with.
Is he musical at all, aside from the drums? I mean, does he come up with melodies and things? Does that run through his mind when he's doing it? I think he invents a melody in his head when he's writing lyrics, obviously, but it doesn't really translate to what I do. And do you guys conflict on different parts of songs? Do you guys fight it out over what it's going to be?
We don't really fight.
No.
We're really boring like that.
In fact, we have a great deal of respect for each other, and we also give each other a lot of latitude and a lot of space when we're working together. And in fact, when we're left to our own devices and we come back in after your partner's had a chance to work on something, it's always with enthusiasm and excitement. And we seem to really progress well that way.
It doesn't mean we're not critical of each other.
Yeah.
And I mean, we'll all speak up if we don't agree about a part. I mean, sometimes Alex and I can get a little head-to-head.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking creative tension, because sometimes that's
Yeah,
the best
there's
piece.
some creative tension sometimes. Somebody's laying down a part and you have a strong opinion that part is wrong. You have to air it out. And sometimes that doesn't go down so well because everybody's a little bit possessive about their own parts. But generally, if we try to be as respectful as possible when we're doing that. There's no rants involved. But when we're writing together just one-on-one, sometimes we'll have a difference of opinion, but we just let it pass and see which idea kind of surfaces as the better idea. And the same thing when Neil's laying his drums down, sometimes we'll have an opinion on something he's doing that we feel strongly about, and he'll consider it. And if it works, it works, So we're all like that.
So Canadian.
Yeah.
No confrontation.
When do you know when a song?
Okay, sure, whatever you like. Okay, fine.
When do you know when a song's done?
Well, with me, it's never done. So you have to ask him that question. When do you know when a song's done?
When I buy the record. They still do. They still do that. I still have to buy our records. But Ged promises me on the next one. I get one free
If you're a good boy.
Guitars in hand. Why don't we hear another number from Geddy and Alex Rush?
That's not the actual first note.
Okay. You may have to sing along with me because it's too early to sing the high part of the song. I can learn to resist anything but temptation. I can learn to coexist with anything but pain. I can learn to compromise anything but my desires. I can learn to get along with all the things I can't explain. I can learn to resist anything but frustration. I can learn to persist with anything but aiming low. I can learn to close my eyes to anything but injustice. I can learn to get along with all the things I don't know. You can surrender without a prayer, but never really pray. Pray without surrender. You can fight without ever winning, but never ever win. Win without a fight. Thank you. Thank you. You may find there are a lot of cats around the room now outside. We may have attracted a lot of cats after that.
When did you find your voice?
Oh, I've been looking for it since 9 o'clock this morning. I don't know, when I was young, I was in the choir at school, and they always made me a soprano for some reason. And I loved singing. And when I was in the first band I was in, which was the Dusty Coconuts, I can't remember how old I was, maybe 13, 14. No one else wanted to sing, so I said, okay, I'll sing. And, we used to do songs like As Tears Go By and stuff like that. And it's always been a pleasure for me. It's always the toughest part of my gig is to sing, but it's always the most rewarding in some ways.
And why don't you sing? I notice when you play guitar, you don't mouth the words or anything. I mean, you are part of this instrument when you're playing. And
only when I do radio shows. Normally I sing along, but it sounds like this while I'm doing that. I like singing too, but I'm just not allowed to.
That's not true. You're getting better.
Figure another 30 years and I'll have it.
But he speaks really well.
When you do, you actually, I heard you kind of do that real low thing here, that spoken word thing you were doing
That's
earlier.
for our radio station that Getty and I are working on.
And what are you going to call
What was it called
that?
again? Idiots Off the Air?
IOA. You're listening to IOA Radio. Yeah, that's pretty good.
During the time that Neil was healing, you guys both had some solo projects, which are quite well received from out there. You worked on Andromeda, the soundtrack. How was it doing a soundtrack?
They had it for 2 seasons, and then the production changed, and they actually brought in a whole different production company. They changed the music, and they've changed a lot of things about the show. But that certainly was a lot of fun for me to do. I'd never done anything like that before. And because the show was in early production at the time, I got a sheet of paper that said, soundtrack like 10,000 guitars. And that was it. Those were the instructions. And then they told me that, it's 50 seconds that you're looking for, and these are the characters, and these are the points, and that was it. So I really had nothing to work to, no picture, nothing. And just kind of developed something and sent it out to them, and they were quite pleased with it, and I sort of, wiped my brow, and that was that.
Nothing I've seen here in the States, but what was the TV show that you were in up there? In Canada?
Oh, Trailer Park Boys.
Oh, Trailer Park Boys. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Trailer Park Boys. Yeah, it's a Canadian production. It's done out in the East Coast in Nova Scotia. It's been running for 4 seasons now, and it's about life in a trailer park and these few characters and all the crazy things that they get into and happen to them. And it's done like a mockumentary, but it's very, very low, super low budget. But it is really, really funny, very clever. These guys are really smart. It's available here in America on BBC America. They just signed a distribution deal, and I know that they're showing the first couple of seasons. But I would highly recommend it. It's a very, very funny show.
And you did Headache.
Headache.
You have a headache? My favorite Headache, which you hooked up with a couple of other players to do. And was there something going on at this time that you just thought, this Rush thing is never going to get back together again?
Not really, because I had planned to start writing with my good friend Ben Mink before any of the terrible things started happening. We had scheduled for that fall of 97 to start writing together. And so this was something that we've been talking about for, 20 years. Like, we'd like to just write together. So he came up to Toronto, and unfortunately it was a rather sad time because it was the aftermath of all these events. And then I thought, well, I was going to cancel it, and I thought, it's good for me to do some work. And so it was very low-key, and we started just playing some music together, and before we knew it, we had written 3 songs. And then we decided, okay, over the next year or so, we'll just keep going back and forth to each other's studios. He lives in Vancouver. And we would just start gathering material. And before we knew it, the thing had taken on a life of its own, and we decided that we would bring some other musicians in, and Matt Cameron from Soundgarden and now in Pearl Jam showed some interest to play with us. And I thought that was a great opportunity to play with another great drummer. And before we knew it, we had made an album. So it turned out to be a very therapeutic thing for me, very liberating thing for me, because I got to spend time working on lyrics for the first time in a long time in a serious way. And I got to play with really some wonderful people. And I spent 2 great weeks in Seattle recording Matt and meeting a lot of great folks. And it was just a great experience for me.
That was well accepted. You did well with that album.
Thank you. Yeah, but people seem to like it.
Let's go back to this audience full of Rush fans here who have a few questions. Brent Rose came all the way from Omaha, Nebraska. This is an interesting question. This was something I was thinking about asking, and I see he actually put it in a better phrase than I did.
Actually, first off, I want to thank you for the musical ride you've taken us for the last 30 years, and I can't wait to see what you guys will do in the future. But basically, a lot of your music would do very well with a symphony or an orchestra in the background. Have you guys ever thought of doing a concert with the backing orchestra and putting it down on tape?
Yeah, I've thought about it a lot, actually. Years ago, we thought about doing that, and then everybody started doing it. So we said, well, maybe we shouldn't do it right now. But at some point in the future, I would like to do that. I think a lot of our music really suits it.
Would that be a whole different scheme of playing and arranging? And
oh, yeah, that'd be great fun. Yeah. I mean, I think if we were going to do something like that, it would have to be just very limited dates, like pick a handful of cities or something like that and just, rehearse a orchestral show and do it like that. But I think it would be fun.
I think you have to wear a tuxedo, too.
Do you have a really favorite place to play? I mean, you play all over the world now. So is there a place that a hall or a venue that really has great response to you sonically, or just a place you really love to play?
There's a bunch of them. I love playing Madison Square Garden. There's a vibe in that room. It's so intense. And they feel really like right on top of you. So it's great. You get such strong feedback from them. But there's a lot of great buildings. We played Red Rocks recently in Denver, and wow, was that ever a gorgeous place to play. And Of course, you know, when we went to South America, that was an incredible experience. Those audiences are just unbelievable. I've never seen an audience before that sang our instrumentals with us. They wrote their own parts. I mean, like, how did they do that? They got together and, you know.
The Russian Rio DVD is really, the audience is really amazing in this. Were you prepared for what was going to happen here when you went down there?
No idea.
Not at all. We're pretty much idiots. We didn't really. We keep our head in the sand a lot. We didn't really realize we had so many fans there and that they were so knowledgeable of our music. And it's rather embarrassing to admit that, actually. But
let's go to Ian Cole from up here from Orlando, Florida. This is something you started to talk about before.
Has it been really hard work being in the limelight and still being, you know, what seems to be very genuine, honest guys? Or, you know, was it just luck?
I think it's a combination of things. You know, we are pretty soft-spoken guys generally, so part of that is our upbringing. I don't know what else to say. You know, it's hard to have that kind of perspective on yourself. You know, we just are who we are. Sure, there are moments that it's difficult, especially on tour, where you're constantly thrown into a public situation and there's demands on your time. And at one point in our career, we were very uncomfortable with that. And there were lots of fans asking for autographs all the time. And we didn't know how to deal with it. So we just kind of ran away from it. And then we realized, well, that's just dumb because you just create a negative experience. And now, to me, I just think it's a nice, pleasant hello, and sure, no problem. And you get a moment to chat, and most people are happy to go on their way, and you realize that you've turned a potentially negative experience into a very positive one. So that's, you know, that's part of years and years and years of being in a band and trying to figure out how you're going to be in a band and still be yourself.
You seem to be doing a lot of celebrating on stage this tour. You've always been the masters of technical perfection on stage, and a couple shows recently. You seem to just be having a lot of fun. Is that celebration going to continue into the future with future tours?
I hope so.
Well,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, after the experience with Neil, I think we sort of came to realize that, you know, your life can change just like that. And this thing that we do that we've done for so long that sometimes you take for granted, you really shouldn't. And I know for myself, I get on stage every night and I think this could be the last time I'm here in this city doing this. So I'm going to really have a good time and be very positive and love every second of it. And it's really been like that. It really started on the last tour, but this tour, you know, that in combination with the fact that it's our 30th anniversary, and I look over at this guy and I think, my God, I've known him since I was 12, 13 years old, and the things that we've experienced together, not only this crazy, ridiculous thing that we do in the band, but everything that we've shared and, you know, as two guys, just two friends growing up, makes it really, really special, and it should be celebrated.
He won't go away. I'd just like to add something to that a lot of the reasons we smile on stage and are having so much fun is because of you guys. Because when we came out on stage in Hartford at the beginning of the last tour, it was a very emotional day for us. We had been through a lot. And to see you guys out there smiling like that and giving us such a warm response just made us smile. And really, for the last two tours, I haven't stopped smiling. I get such a nice vibe from you guys out there that it just makes me feel great about what I do. And I think the same is true of Alex and Neil. So
it's wonderful to see your audience leaving the show laughing and like in a really, really good mood. I mean, there's lots of funny little things that we've included in video and you know, goofing around, Stringato, the rap, the terrifying rap, and all of that stuff. But it is just such a wonderful compliment to see your audience leaving feeling really happy. It's a real treat to see.
The other side of that coin are, for years, critics just wouldn't give you the time of day for being as good a band as you were. And I'm sure that stings sometimes. It did early on, and I can't believe it didn't. But you've proved them all wrong, and now it doesn't. Does that faze you at all when you put an album out, or you do shows, or do you read that stuff? Do you care?
I try not to pay too much attention to the good or the bad reviews. And it's true that in the early days there was some pretty harsh stuff said about us, and that was hurtful, of course. But that's part of being in the business. If you're going to go out there and put your music on display, you've got to take the opinions people throw at you. That's, nobody made me do this for a living. It was my choice. So that's fair enough. And as the years have gone on, certainly there's been a huge change in the way we're received, largely. So, you just take it with a grain of salt when they're overly gushing or when they're overly critical. It's all amounts to the same thing. You just kind of take it with a grain of salt.
You have a visual component to what you do that I've always found fascinating. Two things. This flies in the face of what every marketing guru would say because, you're supposed to stick with what you start with. Your logo changes every time you turn around. So what's the process when you, and your album covers, you have just some of the best album covers that have ever been out there. You always look at them and go, what's this album going to be about? Because that's the first place you come to when you watch it. So tell me what the process goes on between the three of you and whoever else you work with on those two things.
Well, there's an artist, Hugh Syme, whose first album cover he did for us was Caress of Steel. He was a musician from Toronto that we knew, who was also an artist, and right away him and Neil just clicked. Neil really initiates the artwork. Once we have an idea of what the album is going to be, musically and lyrically, he ships all that stuff off to Hugh, and they start throwing ideas back and forth. And once they have some concrete ideas, they bring it to Alex and I, and then we start with our opinions. And it's very much the way we write a song. Somebody initiates it, but everybody gets involved at some point. But it's largely Neil and Hugh that do the art concepts.
And the logo for the band?
Yeah, and the logo early on, Hugh said, you guys are always changing. I think your logo should always be changing. And I think that's totally appropriate.
Let's go back out here because these guys came a long way to put this together. Let's see, where were we? I guess John Lagerquist from Commerce, Michigan.
First of all, I just want to thank XM Radio and you guys for this wonderful opportunity. I can't believe I'm standing here. My question is for Alex. I've got a signature guitar, and I was just wondering what your influences were in the design of those guitars. And then as a follow-up, how did you go about selecting replacements like the PRS for those guitars you played for so long?
Signature is a small company outside of Montreal. I had a friend who was a musical instrument distributor, and he sort of turned me on the guitars, and I was attracted to them because they used a single coil active pickup, and it creates a very wiry kind of sound. The more that we were getting into keyboards, the more that I found the guitar really competing in that sonic area. So the signature was a way of getting around that and sitting on sort of on top of what the keyboards were doing. And the thickness of the keyboards, the guitar would cut through a little bit more. And it was interesting. It was a different sound for me, and it was a different approach, and it made me think differently about my parts and how I played. In terms of design, that was basically the design, the first signature that I had. And we didn't really change much on it. In retrospect, I don't think those guitars were as comfortable to play. They could have used a little bit more work, and I played them for about 4 years, I guess, 3 or 4 years. And then PRS sent me out a guitar, and really that guitar was, out of the case, a fabulous instrument. It was beautifully made. It was in tune, so I didn't have to tune it again. And because I have to keep sending them back to get them tuned. And they were very open to trying things, and I know that they had some people on staff that were Rush fans, and it really meant a lot to them for me to use their instruments, and developed a relationship with them, and I still use their guitars and absolutely love them.
A couple of things to wrap up here, any social concerns either of you are involved in, causes that really spark your attention?
Well, I mean, we all have different charities that we work with. We tend to do those things rather quietly than make a big fuss about it. But there's one organization I work with called Grapes for Humanity. We've been raising money over the last few years. We're all wine lovers, and we put on elaborate wine dinners and have these wine auctions, and we've gotten a lot of help from a lot of the great winemakers around the world, and we've been able to raise money to build prosthetic clinics in places like Honduras and Cambodia and in Vietnam, places like that, in order to help victims of landmine. And they largely get overlooked by a lot of these governments. So, and you know, for a sum of about $50,000 to $75,000, you can build a prosthetic clinic in a small village and have it staffed by victims themselves, and it continues to help the area. So that's one area that I'm very pleased to be involved with.
Alex?
Nothing specifically, but as Getty said, you know, we do get involved in a lot of personal charities. And
well, you've been involved with the White Ribbon campaign.
Well, White Ribbon for many years, and that's bringing attention to men with the abuse of women. And we run a couple of concerts annually in Toronto, and it's quite rewarding.
You did that SARS benefit there. That must have been a pretty scary time up there.
It was really sad because, you know, here was this great city that we were all living in, and it was completely safe, you know, for the most part. And yet the picture that people had of Toronto was that it was this, you know, germ-ridden place. And we have a lot of friends in the service industries and restaurants and bars and clubs and hotels, and they were dying. And a lot of them went out of business. I don't think people realized how serious tourism affected that city. I mean, it crippled that city for a year and a half, and it's just starting to come back from it now. So when the Rolling Stones generously decided to put that show on and to help out, because they've done a lot of their rehearsals there and they hang out in Toronto a lot, they really wanted to help. I thought it was an incredibly magnanimous thing for them to do. And when they asked us, you know, we had to do it. You know, it's hometown for us. So, yeah, that was an important event, but it was amazing to look out and see 500,000 people. I mean, you can't imagine what that looks like. That's a lot of people. That was an incredible day.
Yeah, as far as you could see, it was people to the horizon in every direction. And it was a wonderful concert. No one was hurt. No one was arrested. There was no trouble. They closed a major highway, like 8-lane highway, and used it as a huge sidewalk for everyone to walk out of. I mean, it was right there at the venue, and you could walk out right to downtown Toronto. It was just a really, really beautiful event.
You think they'd learn something from events like that?
Yeah.
And finally, personal influences, people who've really changed your outlook on life or really had an impact on you. Could be anybody.
Well, there's so many. You know, it begins with your parents. And for me, my mother was incredibly inspirational. Just what she lived through and the grace with which she carries herself still to this day. You know, meeting Neil was a great influence on my life. Finding somebody who loved the written word so much influenced my love for reading. There's so many artists, musicians, book writers. I could go on forever. Filmmakers. It's a wonderful world, full of great people to inspire you every day. And I'm fortunate.
Thank you very much for being here. You enrich our lives out there with your music. And, you know, here's to thinking that you'll be here for many, many years. You know, it seems like rock and roll is a growing business in the sense of it's not aging now like it used to. So it's great having you here. Thanks for all the years you've given us and what's to come.
Thank you very much.
Alex and Getty.
Thank you.
Thank you.